Extravaganza. We are so excited to have you guys here, right? I guess it's not too early. You're just our first class of the day. For cake. Who else starts their morning off at 11 o'clock with cake? Or earlier. We've been starting really early today. Well, we've just been reminiscing today. We were just talking, and if you guys were to think back to 2016, could you think of like something that, like, I'm like, I don't know. I can't even remember what I ate yesterday, let alone my kids' phone numbers. So, but we were just talking this week marks the 5th anniversary of us sharing cake with you guys together. And it was so fun. We oftentimes tell the story, so if you've heard this before, we'll tell you again. But it's kind of like our courtship story. You know, when people get up at church and they're like, this is how we met, and this is what we do.
Like our blind date story.
Yes.
Nerves on both sides.
Courtney was kind of just beginning.
I was a year into my blog.
Yeah. And she was tagging us in like her posts, and I had just recently...
Pay attention to me. Repost me.
She's doing a great job. It was kind of one of those things too where it was like cupcakes were on their way out, and we were so excited that someone was doing something other than cupcakes, because we were like, if one more cupcake wedding comes, we're done. And it was fun to see, like, let's go back to the traditional cake, getting away from fondant, and you know, you think about 5 years ago how food trends change so often. But she was posting all these things, and I'm like, oh, a chocolate cake would be so fun to have at our chocolate extravaganza. So I okay, please say yes, please say yes. I'm just gonna reach out and see if she would like to teach a class with us, and just hope that she'd say yes. And little did I know, she was on the other end, like, oh my gosh, they asked me to teach, what am I going to do? So we were excited. We were both very nervous for that first date. Yes. And we taught the first class, and our minds were blown. You guys showed up, and we're so excited about cake, just like we were. We were excited to jump back into the kitchen, to have a homemade recipe, to have the techniques to be able to create these things in your kitchen. And it has been a match made with us and you guys ever since, because we get to see that, like, that aha moment, that light bulb moment, that experience that you guys have, that, like, I've been trying this and it just hasn't happened, and it's been happening for the last 5 years, and it feels so magical to do it with you guys. During COVID and the quarantine, Courtney and I would message Marco, call weekly, and we're like, man, I'm in a funk. I'm having withdrawals being in the kitchen with you guys, and we didn't realize how much being with you guys and experiencing this really boosts our spirits and helps us grow. And it's been so fun to see how this class has evolved over the last 5 years. If you were to look back at our first class, the principles and the technique and the concepts are all the same, but the things that Courtney's been able to do to change that for you guys to understand and just to evolve slowly.
Ghost moment.
Yes.
It's having a ghost moment. It's what's changed the most.
And you'll hear phrases like light touch and we love to hear you guys incorporate into your own life. My good side, I hear other teachers use it now, and I'm like, it's so refreshing to hear that, like, look, we don't have to have everything absolutely perfect, but what matters is it tastes good, and it's something you're doing together with your family in your kitchen. And so we're so excited to have you guys here with us. Thanks for joining us. Courtney, thanks for being a part of our family. I didn't even cry, guys. This is like a big day. Like, usually I'm up here like, just love Courtney, she's great.
It doesn't make you feel like a family. Like, you walk into the store and you're like, oh, you just know everyone, right? And when who left? Frank. When Frank left, you're like, where'd Frank go, right? The turtleneck Frank with the mustache was always in the front. You're like, what happened to Frank? Anyway, this is like second home to me, and I know for a lot of you guys, because this is your go-to. All right, should we jump into cake?
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much. Oh man, it is kind of funny, like, that this has been 5 years, because we were for sure certain it was 4 years, and then Heather looked back at the calendar and she's like, it's been 5. I'm like, that's a good thing, right? It flies by, or it feels like it's just always been a thing, and there was never a start date. But I do remember that first meeting, because I flew in from a work trip and I was still consulting. So I flew in and I tried to, like, freshen myself up to come into the store and meet Heather, and I had no idea what she looked like. So I was just kind of like walking around for someone, like, hopefully we met eyes with someone, and anyway, we met, but I was so nervous.
Locked eyes ever since.
Okay, guys, we're going to make my cookies and cream cake together, and you guys can eat it at the end. We'll cut it up and serve you guys some lunch, okay? But I don't know if any of anyone knows my story, or maybe you've heard it 1,000 times, and I'll just go through it briefly, because cake has not always been part of my journey, and it's so interesting to look back at our lives, right, and see like just where crossroads happens, or a fork, and you're like, I gotta make a decision and change, or just where little elements come in, and then all of a sudden your life has totally changed 12 years later, like mine is. So I made my first cake from scratch for Weston's first birthday, which will always make me cry, because he was a blessing in so many ways for my family, my things going on with my parents, but he was the reason I made my first cake from scratch. And he'll be 13 in December, and I'm freaking out about it, you guys. He's almost as tall as me, so I may need like a support group. Is there like a teenager support group? I'm gonna need it. And he's just the greatest. So his first birthday was rolling around, and we were living in Santa Monica at the time. So Ryan and I were both in consulting. He did business, I did media consulting. And I was traveling on and off. I was doing it as freelance, now as a new mom. And so I, week leading up to his party, I'm like, I'm gonna make a cake from scratch. I don't know why, that just felt like something I needed to do, along with all my homemade like pictures I put up with him and cutouts, and this homemade, you guys, awful. I think this is more embarrassing than the first cake. Have you guys seen it? I've shown you this. So does anybody remember what my first cake looked like? Okay, I made a homemade cake topper that was like bigger than my head and the cake itself, like with craft paper. Okay, so I was like really trying to be like Pinterest worthy birthday here. The other reason I wanted to make a homemade cake, and this is kind of funny, we can still laugh about it. I hope Rick and Connie laugh about it, because this is Ryan's parents. They're really good cooks. And so when I married into that family 4 years earlier, I was like so excited to be in the kitchen on Sunday dinners, and we were living close by, so I'd just always go in and like, how can I help? And I wanted to be like a great daughter-in-law, and they're like, great, could you cut the basil? Could you cut the parsley? I was chopping herbs for 4 years. I'm not even kidding. It was time to graduate to the next level. I'm like, I'll take anything. Shredding cheese? I filled the ice cups plenty of times, guys. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna make a cake from scratch, because Rick and Connie would be there. And they always had stacks of Bon Appetit magazines in their kitchen. And they'd always make some of the, how Bon Appetit will get restaurant recipes? And it's always in the front, they have a couple. So they would often make those and some of the other recipes. So I grabbed the magazine, and it was a peanut butter cake with chocolate buttercream. And that just sounded amazing, because chocolate peanut butter, hello, so good. And I just went for it. And I had a mixer that I'd gotten for my wedding, and I had store-bought, like grocery store cake pans, and that was it. I didn't have any other cake tools. I had my measuring cups, didn't know a lot about what like sifting things were. I just went for it, okay? And I thought, okay, I can follow the instructions. And I did, and I decorated it, and how? Can you guys see that? Look at that. Right there. Do you see it? It's hard to tell it's a cake because it looks like a ball. And it wasn't meant to be a ball. Do you see the cake topper? Guys, they're equal parts on the page. They're so huge. But here's the thing. I wouldn't have laughed about it then, because I was so dang proud of that cake, and I was so proud of that cake topper, and all the little pictures on, cardstock that I'd put of Weston all throughout the first year. And I was so excited to have all my friends and family over. And I served that cake, and I watched everyone eat it, and I loved just the reviews. Oh my gosh, this is so good. You made this? I just felt like elated. Of course, my words of affirmation are a love language for me, so that helped a ton. But as I was cleaning up that night, I just very distinctly remember that feeling I felt in the kitchen doing it that week, working on it. Put Weston down for a nap. Ryan was at work. I was done with reports for my job. And I would just go in and create. And I loved it. I loved the way that made me feel. So we got done, and the next week I thought, I'm going to make another cake. I want to feel that way again. I want to just do that. And I just kept following that good feeling back into the kitchen almost every single week. Coming up with like, okay, it's Sunday dinner, let's make a cake. Oh, it's a birthday, it's a baby shower, it's a Monday, and then it was a Wednesday, and I'm like, I need cake. Who doesn't need cake? And I just started teaching myself through trial and error for a good 6 years. Just having fun, trying all these different recipes, and learning along the way, right? Okay, I've now tried 6 chocolate cake recipes. What makes this one more moist and this one not as moist, but more of a milk chocolate? And okay, this one has oil, this one has butter. And just really kind of having fun with it for no other reason except it was fun. And I liked the way that it made me feel, and I could share it with people. And then, my kids would start asking, oh, can you do this for my birthday cake? And can you do this for my birthday cake? And I'm like, yes. And then to see their faces, right? Like, oh my gosh, mom just made that for me. It's so cool. So 6 years ago, I started my blog. We just moved to Utah a year before that, and decided, okay, maybe I'll share this. And my mom and my sister were like, you should share your recipes. And it's like, Mom, come on. And I remember feeling very hesitant about it because the blog space and the food space felt so crowded to me. And one of the things, and I'll just finish with this before we get started on the cake, because I think there's room for so much goodness out there. Like, there's just an endless need for it. And goodness can be in the form of cake, or it can be in the form of sewing, or any craft or spirit that you have that you want to share because you love it so much. In consulting, I tested television shows, hundreds of television shows over the 13 years that I had been working in that industry. And we'd go out on the road, and I'd be in places like St. Louis or Dallas or Philadelphia, suburbs of Chicago, all over the place. And I would start a focus group. They'd watch maybe a preview, or right even before we got started with them watching the show, I would ask them what their viewing habits were already. I'm like, what are you watching already? And then there was always a lineup. Oh, these are my top 3 favorite shows. I love these, but I don't have any more time for anything else. Like, that's what I've got. I'm like, oh, I get that. We're all busy. Okay, we've got our priority shows, and then if there's extra time on the weekend, we'll catch up on some of our other ones. And they're like, yeah, so I've got no more time for any other shows. Well, then I'd give them a new show to watch. And if that show was good, if they connected to a storyline, if they connected to a character, if they laughed, if they felt good, like if they liked that show, all of a sudden in the conversation after watching, they would say, okay, yeah, actually I make time for that. I'm going to record that. Yeah, I really like that. I'm like, wait, you told me you had no time. Well, I'll figure it out. I'll make time. I really like that show for X, Y, and Z reasons. Right? And so as I thought about this, and I was really giving myself every reason not to start a blog, not to share what I had learned, not to share my recipes, I thought about that. And I remember sitting thinking, okay, if I can create good content, it will rise to the top. Good content will make its way out there. People will make room for it. And maybe a few people will make my recipes. And that would make me so elated. And so I started it. And I feel like that's the case with just like all the things that we're doing. Like, there's never not a need for your goodness and the things that you can offer to other people. And a year later, Gigi asked me to come teach. Well, I had first done a couple classes in my house, which I don't know, maybe that was kind of sketchy. Ryan for a while was like, who are you inviting to our house? I'm like, I have no idea, but I'm going to teach them cake. So we did that. I have no idea who's about to show up. So it's been really fun to do this. And cake, as I look back, man, it was such a huge blessing. Like, who knew that it would heal me, that it would rescue me, that it would bring me so much joy, and that was something that I would be able to then share with you and with people that I've never met from all over the world. And, we could spend a whole class talking about, right, the journey and all these little things that I look back and I'm like, oh, okay, this happened because of this, and I was supposed to be right here with you today. And I'm so grateful for that. And I love cake so much, not just because it brings me joy, but it's freaking delicious when you make it on your own. And it's like homemade, and it's all these good things, right? And we'll talk about decorating and the looks and all the things in a minute. But just remember, like, focus on the flavor first, focus on the taste, all the design, and getting really good at smoothing out the sides. And we're going to go over that. That just gets better with time. So it's reasons to make more and more cake. And then we just share them with people and make everyone so happy. And you're the most popular neighbor in your neighborhood. So you're welcome. Okay? All right. So let's talk about cake. And you've probably heard me say a lot of these things on the gram. It's in my book. It's online, because I want you to have all this information and not forget it. Like, I want my voice in your head every time you're making a cake. First things first, your oven. We want to preheat it for a good 30 minutes before you start baking. And I think it compares so well to the griddle and making your pancakes. Right? You make your pancakes, and the first batch, right, the first 4 that you do on here, you flip them over, and you're like, they're so splotchy, like, right? And then halfway through the batter, in the very end, all of a sudden, they're like beautiful caramel, golden brown, and you're like, I want those ones. As a mom, it's the only time I want to eat last, because I know my pancakes are going to be the best, right? So same thing with your oven, right? The heat has that extra time to really fill the space and actually get to the temperature you want. Our ovens are so interesting, because they'll like preheat, and they're like, oh, 5 minutes. And you're like, 5 minutes? It's already at 325? Well, maybe it picked up 325 in one spot of your oven, right? And it's not fully heated. So just let that heat go for a little while. And ovens are so different. We could have the exact same oven, and it could bake a little differently. My oven at home, it's a Miele. It's only 3 years old or so, 3.5. And ever since day one, my lower oven is a little bit off, where the back of the oven bakes 3 minutes faster than the front. That's how well I know my oven. That's how well I've gotten to know my oven. That cake layer that's in the back comes out 3 minutes before the other ones. So get to know your oven. Use an oven thermometer, so you're always checking, once a month. Is the temperature inside the oven actually what it's saying on the outside? I want them to be 325. My inside oven thermometer might say 310 or 335, right? A few degrees difference will make a huge difference in how our cake is baking. So it's really good to check that and just have a good idea on like how your oven works. The other thing, only bake on one rack at a time. So if you can only fit 2 cake layers on your middle rack at one time, totally okay. Leave the third one out at room temperature. Cover with maybe a towel or plastic wrap. It's fine at room temperature while the other one's baking. But don't overcrowd your oven or you'll get uneven cake layers. One of the things I love that I read years ago from Bon Appetit and one of their cake recipes is that author had suggested putting a pizza stone at the bottom rack of your oven. And they said, okay, we're not using convection because we don't want that fan. I love conventional, just your regular bake. We can control the heat. You're less likely to dry out your cake. Put the pizza stone on the bottom rack of your oven, and it helps to like bring the air up and around. So it blocks it from just coming straight underneath your cake, and this will help your cake have a more level surface to it and not so much of a dome. All right, so if you have one of those, maybe grab one, and now we're into pizza. Make the food nanny pizza dough, make all her pizzas. Okay, then the other thing before you start baking, all your ingredients coming from the fridge should be at room temperature before you start baking. So give them a couple hours to sit out. Your butter, your buttermilk, your eggs, yogurt, sour cream, whatever is coming from the fridge and going into your cake should be room temperature. Room temperature ingredients can better blend together, but they're better absorbed, and this is the important part. They're better absorbed by the dry ingredients that have your leavening agents in them, and that helps your cake to rise more evenly. And if you don't believe me, I got a test that I did on IGTV. You can go back and look on my Instagram. And I baked cake layers with cold ingredients, and I baked them with room temperature. And the difference was almost double in size on my cake layers. Okay? Yeah, I know. I love the visual. I'm like, oh, it works. The other thing, fresh baking powder and baking soda. All right? So never buy it from Costco, because none of us are going through baking powder that quickly. It shouldn't be older than 6 months. If we want a really good rise in our cake, we're using fresh leavening agents. All right, sometimes I'll say that in cake class and they're hands-on class or even at Pinners, and I can see the faces. I know who's had their Costco baking powder since they got married 5 years ago. I can see it in your eyes. So get rid of it. I go through it a lot, but I love to say just write with a Sharpie the date that you bought it, just so you can kind of keep an idea. So make sure on that. So room temperature ingredients, the baking soda, baking powder. You've got your oven. The pans that I use, I love Fat Daddy-O. They anodize their pans really well. They're light metal. That means the heat's going to distribute evenly through your pans. That will make a difference on how your cake rises, having good pans. And those aren't super expensive. They're here at KB, so use your coupon. Grab those today. Like if there's one thing you should get, that if you don't have anything, is good pans. Right? You've got a mixer, hand mixer, your hand. You can do a lot of things with the cake batter. Having good pans is a great start to make sure your cakes rise really well. I spray them with nonstick spray. I line the bottom with parchment paper, and I do a quick spray one more time. That parchment is key. That helps us really flip it out. There is this cute baker on Instagram too, Sugar Geek. Do you guys follow her? She has something called a goop. What's it called? It's like the cake goop. Anyway, and she mixes like flour, shortening, and something else, and I'm totally missing it. And she just like layers it on her pan with no parchment. I need to try it because I'm like, oh, that looks like it falls out great too. So,
is it ghee?
What's that?
Is it ghee?
No, I don't know if she uses. I don't know. I don't know. I know it's shortening flour, and then there was something else. If it was butter and she just mixes it up, and it kind of looks like frosting almost, and she just wipes it in her pan. So that's another option if you don't have parchment paper. Look her up, Sugar Geek. She's got lots of fun tips too for Swiss meringue buttercreams. Okay, so now as we get started on mixing our cake batter, I always start with like butter, sugar, eggs, usually. This chocolate cake is a little different. It doesn't have the butter. But if your recipe has the butter, the sugar, the eggs, that is the time that we are mixing on high speed, like a 6 to 8 on your KitchenAid. because we want to get a nice light and fluffy texture during that stage of mixing, and that's going to help your cake to rise really nicely later and have a great crumb, tender, moist, all the things. So mix it on high there. We're almost going to like double the volume. And then when you start to add your dry ingredients to your wet, that's when you turn the mixer to low, like stir setting, and only mix until things are incorporated. So it's probably about 30 seconds. Scrape down the side, the bottom of your bowl, mix again for another 20 seconds, and you're good. Stop it. Then we'll evenly distribute the batter in our pans, bake them. I always say, usually a recipe will give you a time frame for baking, like 25 to 30 minutes. Go with the least amount of time. Check it like 3 minutes before it's almost done. Just turn the light on. We don't want our cakes to look shiny on the top anymore. They shouldn't jiggle, right? And then the side, like the very top around of the pan, as you look at it, the cake will maybe start pulling away just a little bit. And then to really know if it's at the perfect time bake, you insert a toothpick in the center of the cake. And when a toothpick comes out, it should have a few moist crumbs on it. So it's still going to bake for about 5 minutes while it's in the pan. So we don't want that toothpick to come out totally clean. And I worry if it gets dried out a little bit. If your cake is coming out dry, most likely it's been overbaked. That's most likely the reason, okay? So keep an eye on it, get to know your oven. You may be less time than me, you may be more time. So in my cookbook, I left spots for you guys to write because I think it's so important to mark up in your cookbook. Not just for the notes, but I think it's so fun when you pass down your cookbooks. Or like I get vintage cookbooks and have started collecting them, and I love seeing the notes that women have written in the cookbooks, and just like, this is my favorite, it's great for Thanksgiving, and you're like, oh my gosh, Betsy loved this, I'm gonna try it for Thanksgiving because Betsy loved it. Okay, I think that's it for cake, just all those quick tips, keep those in mind. And then buttercream, couple different things. One, I'm starting out with butter that's slightly cold, so not totally room temperature. You're going to soften the butter in your mixer by beating the butter on its own for a couple minutes, get it light and fluffy in texture. But having it slightly cold actually allows it to do much better on your spatula. Like it just was, once we get it on here and we go here and gravity wants to work its magic, it stays in place, but you can easily spread it because it's soft. Does that make sense? So it's still slightly cold, but it's really soft and easily spreadable. The other two things that are going to help your buttercream be really spreadable easily, because we do not want to do hard pressure, light touch. I'll say that forever, light touch once we start spreading our buttercream, is we want to sift our powdered sugar, and I love just using a mesh strainer and a whisk. Make it so fast, so easy, okay? Sift your powdered sugar, makes it a finer consistency, a silkier buttercream, and easier to smooth and get smooth sides when you're decorating your cake. I also love adding heavy whipping cream. Costco has that dairy gold that's 40% fat, and it's liquid gold. I don't know why the grocery stores want to sell dairy gold that's 36%, but I'm like, no, I want 40%. Go to Costco, get your 40% fat cream. But the cream just in general is so good to have, just a few tablespoons, and then we turn the mixer up to high speed, and you just let that buttercream beat for a few minutes. You guys, that is a game changer. Lightens the texture, lightens the color a little bit. If we're looking for like a white buttercream, mix it for like 3 to 5 minutes on high, like 6 to 8. And it's just like such a game changer. And it just makes it so silky and smooth. Okay, so we've got the buttercream. We've talked about our cake layers. I'm going to do a drip, so we'll talk about that in a minute. So let me show you the stacking process. I have got, Heather, do you mind grabbing my water? I forgot to bring it out. Thank you. All right, so turntable, fancy little spinny thing. This one is a Tico. They have lots of different versions. Atico, they're a great baking brand. This one has got the 2-piece cast iron. Thank you so much. You can find it here at Giggy. It spins really beautifully, but some of the plastic ones, they do too. They'll be great. Depends. If you're going with like lots of cakes, they're gonna get heavy. You're doing wedding cakes, I'd get a sturdier one. Weston is like so into cars. He calls this would be the Bugatti. Okay? I don't even know what a Bugatti is. I was like, never heard of that, Weston. He's like, what? Yeah, I need to start researching 13-year-old favorite things, because apparently a Bugatti is one of them. Okay, but also the plastic one by Atico, that's a Honda. That's gonna be great. That is gonna work, it's gonna be durable, it's gonna do what you need to do, okay? So you decide if you need the Honda or the Bugatti. Well, just get one, they're so fun. It came with a little piece of like this no slip grip plastic, but you can buy that separately too. It kind of reminds me of like what's in grandma's drawer, you know, Silverware drawer. Or I saw it, I was at the grocery store one day, and now they make small ones for can openers to help you open the can. And I was like, oh, the cake thing! And like, oh no, it's labels as a can. But you can find them at the grocery store. So I think that's helpful because then that's going to help hold your cake boards in place. Now I have two tapes together. This larger one is 9 inches, you could do 10 inches, but it's taped to my 8-inch cake board, and that's the size of my cake. That is always going to stay under my cake. I'm going to cover it, you're not going to see it, you won't know it's there, but it makes it so much easier to take a spatula, a cake lifter, lift up your board, and move it to a beautiful cake stand. But we want this larger one here because I'll move my cake in and out of the freezer at different stages of decorating, and then I don't ruin the edges of my cake. Does that make sense? Okay, so we've got two there. All right, this is fun. I've got the extra reach. So let's see how close I can get it, and you guys can still see. Okay, so I like to just put a little bit of buttercream on the bottom. Now, this is an offset icing spatula. See how that one's crooked? This one's straight. Offset, this crooked one, I like to use in between my cake layers and on the top. All right, so lifted, it's going to stay out of the way. The straight one on the sides. It's usually about the same height as my cake, which is great. It's going to help me get straight sides in addition to using my scraper. I felt like this was my Goldilocks story. I was using spatulas and scrapers that were like too small, too big, too thick, too heavy, and I decided to make mine so they were just right. And these ones, what I think is most important as you're picking out a scraper and spatulas is the size, like 8 inches, right? That one's 8 inches tall, so that's going to work for my 4-layer 6-inch cakes and my 3-layer 8-inch cakes. But also, can you see how thin that is? Like the blade there? Super thin and a lightweight metal material. This is aluminum. Same here, okay? Really lightweight, not too thick, so they won't pull at the buttercream unnecessarily. Okay, we'll talk about that more in just a minute. And we'll use the acrylic gel. So I'm going to take my cake layers. This is my dark chocolate cake. And I saw Heather brought the chocolate out. I want to show you this cocoa powder because the flavor is just phenomenal. Okay, cacao berry extra brut. You can get this here. It is a dark, it's rich, it's so good. Now don't be scared of the word dark chocolate if you're like a milk chocolate fan. By the time we're adding dark chocolate into our ganache or even into our cake, think about how many other ingredients are in there. And we've got the sugar and the powdered sugar. It sweetens it up. So it's not gonna, like, you're not gonna bite into it and think, oh, that tastes like bitter, dark chocolate. But it just enhances the chocolate flavor and we don't lose it. So that's why I prefer you use a dark chocolate versus a milk chocolate or just a regular cocoa powder in here. So you just get that really beautiful, awesome chocolate flavor. All right, now this is a piping bag. We got a lot in here, hold on. And it has my Wilton 1M tip in there, which I'll be using on top of the cake. But I'm just gonna pipe a rim of buttercream around the edge. I gotta use 2 hands right now. And this is just to hold in my my filling. So anytime you're using a soft filling, like a lemon curd or a Crumb Coat, and this filling's kind of soft because it's got cream cheese and whipped cream, you want to pipe a rim around the edge to make sure nothing spills out. Now, this filling is thick enough that I am going to add a huge scoop right in here. But I wouldn't do that much of lemon curd because it's so much thinner. All right, so we're just going to add this. And I think you guys all have the recipe. It's just like good stuff, you know, like cream cheese and heavy whipping cream and powdered sugar and Oreos. So major win here. Okay, so as I spread this filling, or if I'm using buttercream, it's going to be the same thing. I'm using my offset icing spatula. Now I have an overhand grip, and these little things are important because it's going to help the spreading process go so smooth. All right, now I push the turntable away from me with my left hand. I'm right-handed, so I'm pushing this away from me, and I'm bringing my spatula towards me. And I just like this lightly pushing this out in kind of a half circle motion. Can you see that on the top there? Now, it is not totally flat on my filling. It's slightly angled, but angled this way, not this way. Because if I go here, we're creating a dome. We want to be flat. We want to create a level surface. So make sure that corner to that edge, this whole line, is always on your buttercream or your filling to get it really, really even and smooth. Now, my little Avery is a dancer. And, you know, if I go watch, you hear the teachers do the counting. And they're like, okay, 5, 6, 5, 6, 7, 8. And they start with the counting, and then they move to sounds for their counting. And it's like, and I was in class one day, and all of a sudden, I'm like giving the words instruction. And then I'm like, and then you just, and someone's like, what are you saying? And I was like, I'm saying, that's my count, that's my instruction. I want you to just say, and Now you'll never make a cake without thinking Swish. It actually works very well in my mind because I also play basketball, so it's just like the best right through the hoop, so easy. Okay, then we get eye level and make sure it's nice and flat. So do a squat, do a lunge, whatever you gotta do. If you wanna just lift this guy up so you can see it and you're not doing a squat, that's fine with me. Get eye level to make sure it looks nice and even. If you have cookie crumble, oat crumble, all the fun little textures I love putting in my cakes, pat them into place so they're nice and level, right? Just really gentle, pat them into place, and then we're ready to move on to the next cake layer. Now I usually do top side up, last one will go top side down. So if I have trimmed my cake layer at all, if you do have to level it, lucky you, you get a cake taco, you get to sample, kind of the best thing. You're like, it's bittersweet when your cake layer is baked perfectly flat. You're like, yes, I nailed it. And then you're like really bummed because you don't have cake scraps to eat. So, yeah, I mean, if you want the dome, do the dome, no problem, okay? But if I've leveled it, I don't want to put the crumbs right onto the cake board because they'll stick and it'll be just kind of messier and harder to serve your cake layer. So we have the smooth side here, but then also we're going to put the smooth side on the top when we decorate the cake. So that's why the last one goes top side down. So we tuck the crumbs under if there is, like if we've leveled it at all, and we have the smooth side on top. So we're going to do this one more time. Do a rim of buttercream. Refill it. I think there's a cookie stuck in there. Okay, we're not going to stress about that for a minute. I'm going to let you take that out. And I'm just going to spread this around and then we'll add buttercream. This is like a really good dessert dip. Get some like chocolate graham crackers, regular graham crackers. Put it on your ice cream. Ah, it's just good. So good. Okay. And you don't take the cream out of the Oreos when you're making this. I get that question sometimes. Just throw them into your food processor, your blender, crush up the Oreos. Same for the buttercream. Why would we take that cream out? That's the best part. All right. So we're nice and eye level. Make sure that looks good. Okay. And then I'm going to put this one on top. Last one goes top side down. I like to work with cake layers that are chilled. So I usually will bake my cake layers and they're frozen before I start. I let them thaw for about 30 to 60 minutes, but it's easier to handle the cake layers when they're chilled. You won't have as many crumbs come up in, thank you, your buttercream. Will you come turn this? I think I'm just going to put so much in here. Oh, I got the cookie. It's okay.
It's still in
yeah.
there? Oh.
That's okay. I'll start frosting. We're good. We'll pack it in. Okay, so now we're ready for our crumb coat. And our crumb coat is just a thin layer of buttercream that we are going to put around the entire cake, and then we're going to freeze it for about 10 minutes. All right, just to set everything in place, and then we can go back over it with a final coat of frosting. So now I've moved on to my straight spatula, and I'm going to do my sides first. And you don't need a ton. Like, I'm going to work this buttercream around the cake. It's not going to cover the board just yet. We're just looking to cover the cake and fill in our sides if those need to be filled in. Usually, you'll see the cake through the buttercream. I feel like this buttercream, because you have the crumbs, it kind of gets hard to see that you've got the cake there, but we're not looking to put a really thick layer of buttercream on here right now. This is just functional. So as I spread this buttercream, it's the same thing. I push the turntable away from me as I bring the spatula towards me. I'm loading this up with buttercream and just gently kind of working it into place. So I'm like overhand grip again. Just notice that because, you know, we get some fun, creative ways of frosting cakes in cake class. And not that my way is the only way, but I think it's a good way. So try it, see what you think. But sometimes I'll have someone like trying to come in front, right? And they're doing this. And it'll just like pull up the crumbs and they start to pull up their cake. Or it just is not going very efficiently. Another one I see sometimes is like a Monet situation. I'm like, wow, that's gonna be a beautiful painting. But again, it gets really interesting as they start to pull up the cake. So light touch, I'm just gently smoothing that buttercream around my cake, overhand grip coming over to the opposite side of like my actual hand, right? I'm right-handed, but I come to my left side so I can see that really easily come around. Okay, and then I'm going to just add a little bit to the top. And that's it. That's a crumb coat. Then that goes into the freezer for 10 minutes, and then we can finish decorating it. Now, the crumb coat, 5 minutes. give yourself, I think honestly it's helpful to set little timers here and there when you're decorating, because sometimes we can get, I don't know, a little perfectionist side of us coming out and we're like, oh, do I need to fix that? Not in the crumb coat. Just get that covered, cover it up, give yourself 5 minutes to do this part, and then put it in the freezer for 10 minutes, and we'll finish it up in just a second. So I'm just going to clean up my sides a little bit with my scraper. So always hold it even, grip, so my hand's right in the middle. And then I like to think of my turntable like a clock. So my hands will start together at about 1 or 2 o'clock. My scraper for this part is resting on top of the 8-inch board, and I'm right against the cake. The scraper's at about a 45-degree angle. Can you see that angle towards me? And then my left hand comes under the turntable. So it's a little funky motion. You can practice it with your fake cake in front of you. You're here, and then it comes around and goes under like that. Does that make sense? So that this hand doesn't bump this hand, and I can go swish again.
I think you should have them do it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Should we do it together? Okay. All right. Ready? This is a hands-on class, guys. All right. So we're at, 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock here. Turn with your left. Good. Right hand stays in place. Not everyone's using the right hand. This is crazy to me. We're just and then we meet at like 4 or 5 o'clock. Okay. There's that sound again. Just because we don't want to all of a sudden have this really heavy grip at the end or pushing hard. The key is a light touch. Keep that 45-degree angle, because when we get here, a lot of times I see people's scraper go like this. Well, look at the difference. All of a sudden, we're at this perpendicular 90-degree angle. We want to be right here. That's just enough that whatever buttercream it's touching, it kind of fills in the sides. Now, we'll go over that again with our final coat of buttercream we'll do in just a minute. All right, so anything hanging out at the top now that's like left over, just take your spatula, your offset spatula, and starting across from you, just drag that buttercream into the center. Not in an angle, just hold it nice and parallel to the top of the cake. Yeah? All right, so that's the crumb coat. We're going to switch this out. And I'm going to do my other cake. And we're going to add the acrylic disc on top. So after 10 minutes in the freezer, you're ready to do your final coat of frosting. Whether you're using the disc or not, you still want to do the crumb coat. It's still going to be super helpful so that you don't have any cake crumbs coming up into your buttercream. All right, now, the disc is a 1/4 inch bigger than the cake. And we're going to set that right on top. Now, this is a stage that we can fix anything that's a little imperfect. So if you have a leaning Tower of Pisa, or the top is a little uneven, we can fix that with the disc, and I'm going to show you how. So, getting eye level with my cake, I did this totally on purpose. It needs fixing both ways. So it's a little bit leaning that way, like this. So the first thing I want to do is, because it's a little bit leaning that way, I actually don't want my acrylic disc to go too far over that. It's not going to be directly in the middle. I'm actually going to bring it over here a little bit more. Does that make sense? So my disc is going to come over this side a little bit more so it lines up with the bottom half of my cake here. And then this one, it doesn't have the disc hanging over just as much, but it lines up at the bottom of the cake there. So we'll have more buttercream right here and a little bit more up here. Does that make sense? Okay. Now the other thing, as I look, this side's a little bit lower. So what I can do is place my hand right here, just a light pressure. There's that word again, light pressure, light touch, and it lifts up my acrylic disc. So now, as I start to add my buttercream, and I'm going to start over here, I'm going to push a little buttercream up underneath the disc, a little more than I need to the rest of the way around. So it lifts the disc, and now it's in place and in line with that side of the cake. So later I'm going to cut this off, and I've built up a rim here that's equal to the rim there, and I'll fill it in with buttercream later. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to go around the whole top half of the cake, get my disc set in place. If your disc is moving around when you're doing this part, you're pushing too hard. Light touch. We really thought about putting that on one of my shirts instead of just like I love cake, but it felt inappropriate no matter where you put it. Couldn't put it on the pocket, couldn't put it on nowhere. So I just want you to just always be thinking about it, okay? Just use that light touch. Heather actually once gave me a bracelet for our anniversary that had it just on the inside. Because no one would quite understand if they weren't us what light touch meant.
And you'd have to get pretty close to read it. So
Yeah.
if they were that close, they would know.
A little thought. Okay, so I've got around the top half of the cake. So the acrylic disc is set in place, and I have something to cut away from. Does that make sense? The other thing before you do your final coat, and I should have done this a second ago, is just mix your buttercream by hand. Grab your spatula, wooden spoon, whatever you have close by, and mix it by hand so you can get any air pockets out that you use that got in there from the mixer. Like we wanted that air, we want to get it light and fluffy, but to make our smoothing process go a little bit easier, just mix it by hand for a second. Now, we're going to work our way down. The key here is we're using the disc as our guide. And we're going to go all the way down, so we're covering that 8-inch board. Okay, we won't see it, covering it. And before I even use my scraper, I'm using my straight spatula to help me get fairly straight sides. It's going to look pretty rustic, but I want the sides to look straight even before I do my scraper. And so that taller spatula that I've got, this 6-inch spatula, is super helpful for that because it kind of lines up with the disc and the bottom. So I'm pushing that buttercream down over the cake board and filling in the rest of the cake. Same motion like I did with the crumb coat. Not pushing hard, really light touch, but the buttercream is nice and spreadable. Now, if it's not, and you feel like, oh man, I really have to push hard to move this buttercream, it's probably too cold or you haven't mixed it long enough. So put it back in with the mixer, mix it up a little bit more, maybe add a little heavy whipping cream. So see how, it's not just falling off my spatula, right? It's here, but I'm not having to push hard, right? We don't want our cake moving around. We don't want to pull up a bunch of crumbs. And if that's happening, then we know our buttercream is maybe too, oh, no, I'm sorry too. I'm sorry. All right, so I want to get eye level now and kind of spin my cake. All right, I'm a little bulky right here, so I'm going to add a little bit more at the top. Now, I don't have to do a ton over the acrylic disc. You should still be able to see the acrylic disc, but you do want a little bit over it so that as we start to spread and smooth out this buttercream with the scraper, we've got some buttercream to work with. All right, so let's just kind of get a good eyeball look here. Make sure everything looks pretty even. And as I just turn, I'm just kind of looking at the side. How does that look? Does that look pretty straight? Do I need to add a little bit more? And then we're going to get started with our scraper. Now, it's called a scraper. It's been called a scraper forever, or a bench scraper, or a cake scraper. I think the first thing I used to smooth out my cake was a bench scraper, a dough scraper, you know, that my in-laws had given me for Christmas. I'm like, what do I use this for? I didn't say anything. I was like, oh my gosh, I love it. No clue what I was supposed to use it for. And then it came in handy when I started doing cakes, but it was really short. All right, so same thing. We're going to have our clock. We're going to have our hand up here. Now my goal is to keep my eye on the scraper. I want that to look as straight as possible the whole time. And I'm using the disc up here as my guide, right? We're going to have it rest against that. And then I'm going to turn. And as I'm looking at my scraper, I may see some space between my scraper and the cake. That might signal to me that I need a little more buttercream there, okay? I didn't take off a ton, but I know I have enough that I'm going to go around it again, right? Because I'm a little bit past my acrylic disc in some areas. I've got enough buttercream to work with here. Eventually, we're going to line it up with that disc really well. But can you see how it's kind of bulked out right there? I've got some stuff to work with. So I'm going to let the buttercream that I have on the cake kind of fill in some of these gaps in some of these areas as I go around it and I keep going around it.
So Courtney, you're not at a 45-degree angle there, are you?
I am, yes.
Or you still are?
Yes.
Okay, it looks more flat to me.
Yes.
Okay.
So I don't want too flat, right? Because that's going to pull up. It's right here. Do you see that?
Yep.
But the goal is to always keep that angle at the end, and that's what gets really tricky because our wrist just wants to start doing this. All right, so I'm getting pretty smooth over here. I'm going to go around it maybe 1 or 2 more times to just smooth out that buttercream. But yeah, watch the scraper there at the top. We're here, and I'm just kind of bringing my arm in so it looks a little bit tighter, but it should still be pretty close to that 75-degree angle. Or, sorry, 75 and 45. All right, I'm going to add just a teeny bit right there and right here at the top. And then we should be pretty good to go. Should be getting there. Now, this is another time that I think setting the timer is super helpful. 15 minutes. You're like, what? No, I've never done a cake in 15 minutes. I bet you can. I bet you can when you set the timer. Now, here's why I want you to set the timer. After about 15 minutes, a couple things happen. One, our crumb coat, no longer frozen. It's gonna stick to your disc. And the disc is helping us get straight sides, sharp edges, awesome to use. It's fun to practice with. But if it sticks after 15 minutes to the disc, and then we put it back in the freezer like we're gonna do, then it comes off with the scrape, or with the disc when we cut the buttercream away. Does that make sense? Like you rip off part of your cake. So we don't want that to happen, all right? The other thing that's super important to me is your sanity. But after 15 minutes, we start to lose it a little bit. Because all of a sudden we're like, oh, okay, that's good, I'm fine with that. But oh, right here, I could fix that. And then you go around it one more time, and you're like, ah, crap, I fixed it, but then I messed up this spot right here. And then it's like this game, right? I don't know if you call it the chicken and egg, but all of a sudden it's like back and forth. Ah, I gotta fix it. Oh, that looks good. And then eventually, if you're like me, and this has happened many of times, you're in tears and you're taking all the buttercream off because the buttercream's no longer working. It's overworked, your disc isn't working, and that's not fun. That's not what cake is meant for. Cake is a happy thing. So if we're ending in tears, we gotta rethink it, all right? We gotta like step back for a minute and say, okay, it's not gonna be perfect. It's not meant to be perfect. It's cake. It's gonna taste delicious. That is what people remember. They do not remember that your sides were beautiful and straight the whole way around. I guarantee it, you guys. No one has ever been like, hey, remember that one cake you made? The sides were so straight. Never! And I made so many cakes. Also, I've never had a cake that I think looks perfect all the way around. There's always my good side, and there's always a side that I would say is the bad side, the back. And I just stand back here the whole time when I'm serving it. I'm like, no one's gonna see it. We don't take a picture of that. So find your good side at 15 minutes and walk away. Now, because of our timing, I am actually just gonna cut the disc off right now because I think we only have 10 minutes. And we have another class at 1 o'clock in that room. So we gotta make sure we got time for questions and eating and all the things. So let's just smooth it out, light touch. You'll notice by the end here, it really is smoothing it out because there's not much buttercream that's coming off, all right? Now, this would go back in the freezer for, I'd give it another 10, 15 minutes. Get to know your freezer, just like your oven. If when you start to cut away the disc, it is cracking your buttercream, it's too cold and you need to do less time in the freezer, all right? If it feels like it is like peeling almost, it might not be cold enough. So when you're doing this, it should be really easy to cut the disc away. So I always hold it with my hand. And again, this should be frozen, but we're gonna be okay. And then you're just running the knife underneath the disc. Hold the back of the disc with your hand so when it's frozen, it doesn't just pop away. Like we want it to be able to cut away from the whole thing, okay? But we'll do this when it's frozen. All right. Oh, it worked right now, so good. Okay, awesome. Now we get to fill in the top with some buttercream and even out our sides. Will you let Cardinal know, or Heather, that I'm ready for a drip? Sure, if they've got it. Okay. So we're just gonna smooth out this buttercream. You probably will not need a ton, but I don't know if you can tell on here, but this was my side that was even, and that was the side that I needed to raise. Oh, you can't really tell, but I can see that I need to fill that in a little bit. So it's nice that, okay, it's lining up. We're gonna just gently spread our buttercream. And I'm gonna be extra gentle since my buttercream's not totally set on the edge, but because the cake is frozen, it's really easy to work with as you do this part.
Now, don't you worry about ruining that perfect edge?
Well, I do now because my buttercream's not chilled, but when you're at home and you do this and you've chilled the cake before you cut the acrylic disc off, it's chilled so you can add in your buttercream. It's not gonna move it around. Yeah, it's set in place.
It's just a moment for the drip. Don't we take this step first?
Oh, no, that's okay. I started it. We can do some questions real quick while she finishes the drip. So I've just smoothed that in. And we'll add the drip in just a minute. And we've got our buttercream. Are there any questions I can answer while we're waiting for our chocolate drip? We'll talk about the drip too. Yeah.
So is there a trick to getting cake to be totally level, like to bake more level so you don't have to cut as much off?
So those were some of the things at the beginning. That pizza stone helps a ton. The cake pans that you buy, the fat daddio, will help a lot because that is anodized metal, which helps your cake to bake evenly and the heat to distribute evenly. So those will help a ton. I think that pizza stone one from Bon Appetit was like golden ticket, honestly. I love it because I don't love the bake even strips. I don't know if you guys have used that. I don't think they work great. They kind of change the texture of my cake too, I've noticed a little bit, and you have to bake a little longer. So I also, you'll notice in my book, and even recipes now that are going on my blog too, and we'll update everything on the blog, I'm baking at 325. That helps a ton as well.
Do you ever?
No.
No.
Did you see what she did? No, I love you for it because you did it, but I'm going to change your life right now. Don't slam your cake pans with the cake batter, okay? Because that takes all the air away. And a little bit that we got in there from the butter and the sugar and the eggs mixing helps our cake to rise really nicely. And you slam that, and you got pound cake, which is great if you want pound cake. But if you don't do that. Okay, so don't do that. But the right pans, that pizza stone is helpful. Room temperature ingredients, super helpful. I'm baking at 325, which means we're going to bake a little bit longer. So instead of 350 at 20 minutes, now we're baking 25 to 30 minutes at 325. You'll have less of a dough.
Does the pizza stone make the same idea as a convection?
Yes, but without blowing the heat and running so hot. Convection is, has the fan that moves around, and even when you adjust the temperature, it seems like it still runs hot, and so you're more likely to dry out your cake by over baking it. But yes, it does work like the convection because it's pushing instead of the heat just coming right underneath your cake, it comes around your cake because that pizza stone blocks it from just coming out. Does that make sense? Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I think we're almost ready for the drip. We got the drip bottle. We're so close. We're so close. Were there any other questions I can answer? And we'll get the other cake out too to serve you guys. Who's made a cake? And I only want to know if you've made mine. Like, no, I'm kidding. Who's made a homemade cake? Yeah? How's it going? How are you feeling? Yeah? What do you feel like you need to work on? I didn't even worry about the frosting part for like the first 6 years. And one of my mom's favorite things, because my stepdad's family is really big, she always puts everything in a 9x13 for his family. Just because it's so much easier to serve, and she's got to usually make 2 of them to serve, right? So it's so easy. You're working on the flavors, and you're not so worried about the design right now. It's like, okay, I'm going to have a really great tasting cake, and you can do it in 9x13 or cupcakes, yeah.
I actually have a question. So I recently even made like yours, even in other cakes that have this, but like the crust.
Mhm.
A lot
Yeah.
of times, no matter what I've done the spray with the flour
Oh, yeah.
powder around, I've
Yeah.
done the goop, I've done all different kinds. And every time I flip it out, it seems like one of them,
It
not
cracks
more than
somewhere.
one, they crumble apart. Am I overbaking?
You might be overbaking it a little bit, but what I want you to focus on more is packing it in really tightly. So sometimes the crumble, if we have it, so I love a little texture in my cake. And if you haven't made any of my cakes, go look at my blog because there's some that are like the s'mores cake. We've got a graham cracker crust, we've got a chocolate cake, we've got a marshmallow filling, chocolate buttercream, and chocolate ganache. Like, I'm serious about my cake, okay? But I love the texture. My coconut key lime pie, also graham cracker crust, right? To kind of resemble that pie. But what you're doing is you put the crust in the cake pan first, and that's usually with a little bit of like, graham cracker, butter, a little sugar. We want to push that really firmly, so it creates like a nice firm structure the best you can. Parchment always helps, and then, flip it the best you can without it, smacking it or slamming it on the counter too much. But try packing it in tighter so those crumbs are really tight, and see if that helps when you're doing that. Also, if you don't love the crust idea, bake it separately in a 9x13 pan or just a jelly roll pan and use it as a filling and crumble it. So you could do that too.
Cool.
On any of them. The ones with the pie crust, the one with the chocolate crust, graham cracker crust, Biscoff crust. I love the crust. Just not our actual pie crust, just FYI.
So when I have done cakes with the filling on the inside,
Yes.
and I do the long slices to cut my cakes, when I get halfway, they always fall over.
Okay.
Is there any, am I doing too much filling in the center?
You might have a little too much filling, but something that could help is using a dowel in those ones, maybe just a couple straws to help hold it into place. Because she's talking about cutting it, as you'd be familiar, like a caterer cuts it usually at a wedding, right? Like this is what you're talking about,
Yep.
versus our party style pizza slices. So this way, and then you're getting here and it's
then
falling over.
Eventually it's just like,
Yeah, because we've got that soft filling in the structure. So if that's happening, give yourself 2 straws over here
Okay.
and see if that helps to just hold that in place a little bit more.
So how do you know when you have it decorated and everything where your dowels are? So you know where you're cutting, or would it just
Well,
be
you
to
can always
here
mark.
instead of here?
Yeah, I mean, I usually, if I'm using dowels, or it's usually because I've got something I have to stack on top. And so I'm always putting those in a 6-inch circle because that's the size of cake I'm putting on top of this one. So I would put like 4, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, and I know. You could always mark your board down here if you're not taking off that, so you know. Otherwise, it's just like fun.
It's just-
Hey, I love the straw! Lucky me! How's our drip?
I broke the rule.
Oh, what'd
and
you do?
And I burned the first bowl of
Oh,
chocolate.
okay.
It was back then. I was like, I haven't burned chocolate in probably 10 years.
Yeah.
And
That's all right.
you were fast. So I was like, oh, hurry, I'll just throw it in. And like, guys, don't burn your chocolate.
Don't. So when I'm making a drip, when Heather's making the drip, we're heating the cream first, the heavy whipping cream, and then we're pouring it over the chocolates, especially the case you need to do it for white chocolate. You can't put those in the microwave together. You could do it over the stove if you want. But we're heating the cream first, pouring it over the chocolate and letting it sit on the chocolate to melt, heat the chocolate, and then you'll stir it to create your ganache. Dark chocolate, you're at a 1-to-1 ratio pretty much. 1 cup cream, 1 cup chips. A white chocolate or any other kind of chip, like a caramel, a peanut butter, a cinnamon, you're gonna go about 1/3 cup cream to 1 cup chips. All right? I added a little bit of black food coloring in here, so it's a little bit more of that really rich Oreo color. And the silicone bowls, you guys have seen me use those. I love those so much. They're so good for your drip. All the chocolate stuff that you guys have been talking about all week. Are you sold out of these yet?
No,
Okay.
we had to buy a container full.
Oh,
So
Heather kept this company in business, guys. They were like, oh, we don't want to do these anymore. And we're like, no, we need these.
you don't have a
please."
choice.
But we did change the color.
We got geeky colors.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So it's not red, orange, green. We now have black, white, and red.
You're welcome.
Which looks like my closet, so it's fine. All right, so we don't want this totally hot, but it helps to put it on a cake that's chilled. So again, you've chilled your cake, you've taken off the acrylic disc, added your buttercream to the top. This should still be pretty cold. If you want to put it back in the freezer for 10 minutes to set your sides, you can. But that helps so the drip doesn't always come all the way down. Now the other thing, when I'm doing my drip, I'm always applying the same amount of pressure on the bottle the whole way around. That doesn't change. What is changing is if I hold the drip bottle in place for 3 seconds versus pulling it back and then applying more of the drip, okay? So start, your bad side, whatever you want to call it. You're holding it at an angle so it falls over the side like a waterfall. And then I like to do a first test. All right, 1, 2, let's see how far down that drips. Do we need a little bit more? Okay, I could probably hold it for a little bit longer than that. Or apply a little bit more pressure. And then I'm just pulling it back just a little bit. And every little bit is gonna be a little uneven. There's no perfect drip. They're all gonna look different. It looks different every time I do it. Oh, that one was long.
You want a few of those?
Yeah. Uneven is good. So we'll just do one more. Okay? And let those fall. And then we're gonna put a little bit on the top. Fill that in. And by a little bit, I mean the rest of that one. I love chocolate. Okay. Clean off your spatula. And then I'm just going to spread this gently. Now, when you do the drip, just go for it. Do not hesitate because you can't go back over it a second time. You will be able to tell. The drip is going to start to set. And if you go over it again, that chocolate doesn't just blend into the drip you already did. It creates a second layer of the drip. And I'm just gently blending that drip into the top, right there. We don't want to push too hard, so we're not pushing what the chocolate we have over the edge. We just want to keep that in place. Every so often I'm blinding myself right now. Like, oh, there it is. There's the light. Okay. All right. Got our chocolate. And now we can just do a little piping design. Let's see if our cookies get stuck or how that's looking. I'm just going to do a little, well, I'll show you all the different things, right? So there's little dollops. Never start too close to the edge over here. Come in about a 1/2 inch. Really easy, okay? We could do a wave. So now we're at an angle and we're pushing the buttercream away and we're letting it drag in. Oh, there's a cookie. I need a toothpick or something. Or maybe my knife. When you make this buttercream, just blend those cookies really, really well. So it's a fine consistency.
Can you get it?
I think I got one. Okay. We could always do a little rosette. So just spin it around. Okay. There we go. A dollop. So we're doing like a rosette, but we're stacking it. Just keep your piping bag lifted. We're always piping right in front of us. But remember, we're not too close to the edge. We don't want it to just fall off. The braid is like the wave, but we come in towards the center of the cake. Halfway down that, we're coming over. And then you have these little nooks. You see my nook right there? I'm going to just fill that in and do the braid that way. We could also do a swirl. So we're just going counterclockwise around, or you could go clockwise. It'll give you a different edge. And then another one I love is just a little zigzag. So lots of different piping options. Very eclectic there on the top. But then that's it. I'm ready to eat. I was making my gingerbread pear cake yesterday, and I had made it on Monday. So I had a lot of cake, and I served it on Tuesday. So I had ginger pear cake 3 days in a row. And yesterday I was like, oh, okay. I won't have any cake tomorrow, and I forgot it was cake class. I was like, oh, yeah, I will. Yeah, no, I'll have it 3 times because it's also the chocolate Oreo cake. Thank you. All right, I am happy to answer questions while we start cutting up cake. We are going to pass these around.
Courtney, is there anything that you would suggest using? I've got 3 kids that are allergic to milk and eggs.
Okay, so I have a fabulous, if I do say so myself, dairy-free, egg-free cake, a vanilla one, on my blog. And it has a lot of information because it took me 8 rounds to get that cake figured out. And on the 7th, it was so funny. Avery must have been like 4 or 5 at the time, so she was home from school early, and she was there in the kitchen with me as I was working on it. And the 7th one came out, and it did not work out, and she was like, "Ooh, you should probably give up." Because I was clearly distressed about it, and I in that moment was like, well, now I can't. Okay, now I have to show you that we don't give up and that we can do it. And luckily, the next round, I went back to all my notes and all the different egg replacements I tried and all the things. And I ended up with just like baking soda and vinegar is my favorite egg replacement to getting it a really like nice rise that's fluffy, because some of the other actual egg replacers, you guys, I tried everything. Just made it gummy, it changed the texture, things didn't rise well. And anyway, so that was my favorite. And you can then start using that recipe and kind of tweak it a little bit, right? If you want to turn that into like a strawberry cake, we'll take out a 1/3 cup sugar, put in strawberry jello or put in strawberry jam, and you can play around with it. But then you have the base recipe to work with for that.
Thank you.
And then also, I love Sweet Laurel Bakery. Get her cookbook because she does gluten-free, refined sugar-free, and then dairy-free as well. She does use eggs, so you can kind of play around with the baking soda vinegar option, but I really love her recipes as well. Sweet Laurel, Laurel. She has a bakery in like the Santa Monica area that's just so yummy. Okay. And we have my other cake back there too, right? That we can. So I'm being generous with your cake. Are you guys doing more classes today? Anything? I guess, is there 2 today? Right, how many were today?
We have lollipops at 2.
Oh, lollipops.
And it's Courtney Day.
Oh yeah. I'm in the other kitchen the rest of the day.
It's beautiful.
Thanks.
Has anyone attempted, did you already ask them? Has anyone tried this one before?
Oh, I don't know if you've tried this one.
Oh, it's so good.
It's really good. Do you have the other one for me to cut?
Yep, she's just putting it
Oh, okay, she was putting frosting on.
Start handing these out.
Anyway, all my recipes are on my blog, and a ton of information on Instagram. My cookbook's available for pre-order. All the recipes will be in both places. I'm not taking them down anywhere. I self-publish, so no one's telling me what to do. And it's a 416-page book. You're welcome to look through it. There's a QR code you can scan to pre-order. And then they'll be in store in I would say like late January here at Kiki.
By the way, that your foot.
Oh, thank you. Talk about a labor of love. Felt like a 3rd pregnancy. In the best way. Love it.
Luckily Karen showed up.
Karen showed up to finish this cake. Oh, she did a beautiful job. Always. Save that for me.
Did you tell her about the center?
Oh, yeah. Guess what? Okay. when you get your coupon code over there, are you guys ready? I can't even take myself. There's another little QR code that takes you directly to the hands-on classes. You get to sign up first if you want to for any class in December.
So on your coupon, on the front of your handout, there's a little QR code that will take you. You are the first to know our December dates. They will go fast. So if you're interested in coming to hands-on December, I would sign up now. But there's 4 classes. What's that?
Are they available right now?
They are available right now. Yes.
I haven't decided what cake we're making yet.
Yes. What do you guys
Oh
want to
wait,
do?
well, we talked about gingerbread caramel. So my gingerbread cake with like toffee bits and caramel buttercream.
Is that a yes?
Yes? Okay, that's what we're doing.
Okay, that's it.
Did that basically get that whole side?
Yeah, all but one.
Okay. So I'm doing good on my cut.
Yeah.
Yes.
My cakes always do this.
Okay.
And I feel like the equivalent is too big. Is it because I'm not adding enough buttercream?
Well,
Are my
you're
pans
taking away
bad?
too much on the bottom.
Okay.
So what's happening is you're using your board
Yeah,
and your disc. Don't use the board as your guide. Your disc only.
disc only.
You could always get a second set of disc and have a disc at the bottom too. But it's just one more thing to take away, right? And to cut away from your. You're trying to keep this looking straight. Don't rely on the board, on the bottom. Yeah.
So you're just relying on the top.
Just on the top. And then your naked eye and that scraper to make sure it looks nice and straight.
Do you think that, is it possible that my pans are not great and my cakes are shrinking a lot, or am I?
Our cakes will always shrink just like a little bit as they come out and as if we wrap them too, if we're wrapping too tight. What pans do you have?
Just, I don't even know.
I mean, I for sure would change your pans first thing. Yeah. And you'll notice a difference in how your cakes bake just through that. Yeah. All right. How's the cake?
Do you pull,
Yes.
the bottom, like the bottom board, if you're transferring it over to a cake?
I just go like this and I lift it up and that board stays under there.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's covered, so like you won't start to see it until you cut the cake. Yes.
Is there a secret butter that you use? I've heard like,
You know, not necessarily for my cakes especially, I think the cake layers, you could really use whatever you want. I use Costco because I'm making so many. If you really want the difference in like the butter, save it for like your buttercream or your cookies where you'll taste it a little bit more and you can tell on the texture. But I just use Costco unsalted. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, baking unsalted. You're always adding salt somewhere else in your recipe. So start with unsalted butter. Okay.
We still need a lot.
We still need a lot?
We've got
Ready to cut some
2.5 rows. Still.
Wait, hold on. How many people? Who needs cake? Okay. 1, and then 5, 10. We need 11. How many do we have there?
We've got 10 with hers.
9, 10.
And that's 11.
And then 11 up
I
there.
think we may have just made it.
I don't want to toot my own horn, but. Well, we got through that side so quick before I even I got finished the second
So
one.
how many slices did you get out of that? You did 8-inch?
Yeah, I did 8-inch, so I probably did 20 with the size that I did them. But it depends how you're cutting it, right? You go thinner, get a little bit more. You can cut it party style. So at Pinner Conference, after my second demo class, I had 3 cakes to serve. And I told people to just come to my booth to get a slice. And I cut it cater style, and then I cut everything else in half. I think out of the 3 cakes, I probably got 200 servings. And they were smaller, but it was like fishes in the loaves. I saw hands, I kept feeding, it just kept going. At one point, Avery's handing out napkins for people to hold their cake. And she goes into the crowd and disappeared for a good 5 minutes. I don't know if she could breathe, I don't know if she was swimming. All of a sudden, she was back. I couldn't believe it. We don't have that?
Yeah, how, who still needs a cake? There's one right there. They need some.
Oh, shoot. Can we cut 1 in half? Okay, wait. How many more do we need? Just the one?
I'll just go get a 6-inch cake.
We're going to share. Oh, I'll share. Well, I can.
No,
I
I'll
can
put
get another
a
slice.
6-inch cake.
Yeah.
Good sharing.
Are you sure you've got a slice?
Just another fork would be all.
Oh, okay. Two forks. Just two forks. You guys are awesome. I'm so sorry. I should have done a better job. You can come eat this part with me.
You did all the hard work.
What are we thinking? Oh, chocolate, heaven? Yeah?
It's not too sweet. It's not too rich. It's not overwhelming.
Because of that dark chocolate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
Okay, I'm gonna go wash my hands and then I'll do that.
Can I take a picture with all you and all these ladies really quick? I guess we have a few guys too, so.
Can you get us?
Okay, guys. So you guys, you gotta smile.
Always. Everyone get a fork?
Okay, ready? Ready for it?
Yeah, I'm just chewing. Okay.
1, 2, 3. Can I get everyone? 3. Yay!
Yay. Okay. I'll be right back.
I've got 6.